Hey, welcome to the Undrafted Hockey Fan. I'm Brad, and let's go over some of the Central Division trade deadline moves that they made and how I thought the teams did. Because a lot of trades were done, not as much so in the Western Conference, but there was some bigger trades coming out, and we're going to be reviewing some of them. Some of them being brokers, and some of them making some pretty smart moves and doing transitioning their team to maybe retoolers. So we'll talk about the St. Louis Blues in that case. And some of them just didn't do that many trades. So let's jump over to the screen. Let's see who we're going to be reviewing. We are going to go top to bottom, so we're going to go Dallas, Minnesota, Colorado, Winnipeg, Nashville, St. Louis, Arizona, and Chicago. And so we'll be going over what moves they did, what I think, and let's jump right into it. So let's jump over into Dallas real quick. In my opinion, they didn't do too much crazy things. You can see probably one of their two best trades are here. They picked up Dodonov, a center from Montreal Canadiens, at 50% retained. They did send out Dennis Gurianov, and the reason they did that is Gurianov really just fell out of favor with the Dallas Stars, and so it's one of those things where Canadians pick up a younger player who still has a lot of potential. Not a lot of potential, has some potential, and Stars who are more in a win now with Sagan and Ben getting older, as well as having Pavelski pretty older in general as it is. They just wanted to get a little bit better, so they picked up some center depth. Another one they did is with the Chicago Blackhawks. This is one of the big ones where they ended up picking up Max Domi, sending out prospect Dylan Wells, which is a goalie. And the nice thing was the Dallas Stars were able to offload Anton Hudobin's contract, as well as just sending out a second-round pick. So that's smart. It worked out well for them, picking up some depth with the Max Domi, and who is doing a phenomenal job this year. And lastly, you have just a quick AHL trade. This is a prospect for prospect, moving out Jacob Peterson for Scott Reedy. So a little small AHL trade, but nothing of consequence for the playoffs moving forward. So let's jump over to the Minnesota Wild. I actually thought they did a really good job this year with their trades. And so we're actually going to start off with Ryan Reeves, picking up Ryan Reeves for a fifth-round pick. This is more just picking up some depth, and because he kind of fell out of favor with the Rangers, not playing well, and the Rangers more focusing on talent and not needing that toughness because they have Kreider and a couple other, and Trouba as well. So Ryan Reeves just was not putting up the points, so getting a fresh start with the Minnesota Wild, who are in a great playoff spot. You can see they're actually almost at the top of the league, or top of the division, 3 points away from Dallas, with the same amount of games played. So, but Dallas is looking at this point differential, this score differential. This is phenomenal. This is huge, and this is what you like to see out of Dallas. This is the type of scoring you want to see, especially because they had some lack of scoring last year in the playoffs. So, Minnesota. Now the problem is with Minnesota is they do have a $12.7 million buyout fee from the Parise and the Suter buyouts that they did. Next 2 years after this is going to be $15 million. So they have to be smart with the money that they're either retaining and with the contracts they're picking up. They really focused a lot on UFAs this year because they don't want to take a lot of cap hit the next years because they just can't. They don't have the room for it. So again, we talked about the Ryan Reeves. We have the Ryan O'Reilly. They acted as a third line broker. So for brokering the Ryan O'Reilly deal, they picked up a fourth-round pick. Of course, then we'll review the Blues in a little bit. But this is smart. They just use their cap space to pick up some money. I actually thought they could have got a little bit more, especially because Arizona, for picking up only $2 million of the 2.5 million of the 2.5 of the Kane deal. They got a third-round pick. So the fact that they only got a fourth-round pick is a little bit lesser, but hey, it's something for just holding on to salary, right? And because that's going to be gone at the end of the year as well. They also acted as a third line broker, picking up another fifth-round pick for holding on to Dmitry Orlov for the Bruins and Capitals pick. Again, another just picking up picks, which is smart for Minnesota because they're not really in buy, they're not really in sell mode. Again, because of that big cap buyout that they have to work within. So this is smart, but because they're in such a good spot for the playoffs, and so. Now, they did bulk up a little bit with Marcus Johansson, a little bit of depth. Only having to send out a third-round pick, which is smart. So, again, these small moves, again, you look at Nyquist, too. He is coming in injured, but he should be ready for the playoffs. And the nice thing is that he's 50% retained, and it only costs a fifth-round pick. So, essentially, you're setting out that fifth-round pick right here that you got from Boston for Gus Nyquist for the playoffs, as well as Jordan Greenway sent out to the Sabres. He was not doing that well with Minnesota, again, kind of falling out of favor, but the nice thing is that they picked up a second round and a fifth round pick, which they can use either to get better or to acquire cheap players, so that they can move past those giant buyouts that they had to do. as well. Again, another cheap pick with Oscar Sundqvist. Just again, a lot of these are depth moves, which is smart. They have a pretty good core up front, I'd say, and then of course they have, unfortunately, not moving out that one pretty big defenseman, Matt Dumba, and so they're just again just shoring up. This nice thing about this Oscar Sundqvist from the Red Wings, because I am a Red Wings fan. He is playing on the PK and the PP, so again he'll get some time and be a pretty versatile player for the Minnesota Wild. I could actually see them signing him for again another cheap deal like this, because again he is so versatile, and that's what the Minnesota Wild are looking for. And lastly, one of the big bells of the ball last year that was talked about a lot was John Klingberg, and where he was going to be going in the UFA status. He ended up signing with Anaheim Ducks for $7 million for 1 year. And so we expected him to have kind of a bounce back season, to be able to go out and maybe get a first round draft pick for him and everything. And you could see John Klingberg at half retained. Look at the Wild sending over 2 prospects and a 4th round draft pick, a pretty small price in my opinion for what John Klingberg could bring. Mind you, he is a huge defensive liability, but a phenomenal defensive. But again, not doing that well this year. Now, I don't think he forgot how to play hockey, but it is a concern to say, hey, what is up with this player? What's happening? So it's a high risk, high reward for Minnesota Wild. So hopefully they can get some of that high production out of him and really cushion him with a good defenseman. So that's the Minnesota Wild. Let's move on to the Colorado Avalanche. Pretty lackluster in my opinion. They started off moving out Martin Kraut and Jacob McDonald. McDonald playing as a roster spot, really switching that out for Matt Nieto, who they're very familiar with, and then. We know that Martin Kraut had requested a trade from the Colorado Avalanche, and Ryan Merkley also requested a trade from the San Jose Sharks. So a match made in heaven. They have just doing a good switch right here, picking a good first round pick from for the Sharks from the Colorado Avalanche. Small AHL trade. This is a goalie for Shane Bowers, who a young center. So good for them on having Shane Bowers there. So also one of the iconic, I made a fun short on this. Jack Johnson signed with the Chicago Blackhawks this past offseason, and Colorado said, hey, we want him back. We want him for another year. We want Stanley Cup winner Jack Johnson! And so, I think that was so much fun. I'm glad they got him, and they were so excited for him, and I'm excited for him to have that. So, they also picked up from the selling Washington Capitals, and for this year, at least, just doing a quick read to them. Selling off Lars Eller to the Colorado Avalanche, 31% retained for a second round pick. Good depth center pickup for them, as well as doing a small AHL trade pick. Player for player, not a big deal with the Rangers. Again, 2 powerhouse teams in this up and coming playoffs, so we'll see if this move ends up being anything consequence, because the only place that these guys would meet would be in the Stanley Cup Finals. So let's move on to Winnipeg as well. 4th place in the Central Division. Did not make a ton of trades. You can see they only made about 3 trades right here. The small one being that they picked up Zach Sanford from the Ottawa Senators for a 5th round pick. This is not even that. They only made 2 picks. Look at that. But the one I did really like is the Nieder Ryder deal. They do have him for another, I think, 2 years after this, and it only cost him a 2nd round pick. That's a smart deal. Winnipeg Jets not trying to do anything crazy, not trying to change their core, which was concerning because there was a huge concern coming out of the coming into the off season of what was going to happen with them. They got a new coach. They've been doing. They were top of the division at one point. Now sitting at 4th, but it is pretty close in the standings. You can see Winnipeg having 72 points, only 7 points back. Similar games played, but again, that could be. If Dallas starts to fall off, Winnipeg could take that spot. But again, you do have sitting in front of them being that the Minnesota Wild and the Colorado Avalanche. Colorado Avalanche having 3 games in hand. And honestly, Nashville, if they won these 3 games that show the distance, that brings them up to be tied with Winnipeg with the same amount of games played. So there's a lot of competition. Again, I don't see Nashville doing that, but I do think that we can probably peg Winnipeg into pegging Winnipeg. You can peg Winnipeg into that 4th spot. One of my other teams I thought was doing something smart. David Poile, the only GM that the Nashville Predators have ever known, is now stepping down. Barry Trotz will be taking over as GM in this position. So he's acting as a consultant, but they're doing a retool or a rebuild. They have some assets they are keeping on to, meaning that they're keeping Forsberg. They're keeping Yossi, and they're keeping their goalie UC Sara, so they're keeping a forward, a defenseman, and a center or a goalie. And so, moving off of Neo Niederreiter, this gets the Predators free of some cap later. Again, and picking up an asset for that in the 2024 draft. This is one of the biggest trades and probably the biggest lopsided trade, I'd say, in in the trade draft. It is huge. Everyone was blown away. I was shocked that it happened like this. You had Tanner Jeannot being sold for a first, a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. That's practically a whole draft, meaning that drafts only go 7 rounds. You're getting practically a whole draft class just for one player. And you're also getting Cal Foote. Cal Foote has not worked out that well with the. He's not doing that great with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Tampa Bay Lightning are in win now mode. So again, one thing that Julian Breezeball did talk about is the value of these picks. They know the value of these picks, and they know the value of having a player now. The one bonus is that Tanner Jeannot is an RFA. So with that RFA status, Tampa Bay Lightning will have control over his signing rights, and they can sign him to a longer term deal, maybe at a cheaper cap hit, and potentially because he's undrafted, he probably can get a 4-year, $3 million, $3 or $4 million. So hopefully we could see that, and they are buying low. The crazy thing is that Tanner Jeannot has not had an amazing season. He had a phenomenal season last year, but not an amazing season this year, and it's amazing that they were able to get this much. I mean, you 100 out of 100 times you take this trade every time if you're Nashville. Again, we'll see what Julian Breezeball does with Tampa Bay Lightning, but hey, this is. I was a little concerned about this trade for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but then I said, hey, wait, this is the Tampa Bay Lightning. They traded a first for Barclay Goodrow. They traded a first for Blake Coleman, and that got them 2 Stanley Cups. So I'm not too concerned. I think the Tampa Bay Lightning know what they're doing, and that's the reason I'm not. There's a reason that I'm not a GM, right? So, and then National Predators was picking up AHL, future considerations from the Flyers, picking up another player, future considerations from the Rangers. And this is another big trade that we did hear that the Mattias Ekholm would be out on the trade block, and so I thought this is a good move by both teams in my opinion. This is an A plus in this case, because picking up Mattias Ekholm, 4% retained along with a 6th round pick for the Oilers, and then also going back Tyson Barrie to make the money work. Reed Schaefer, a 32nd overall by the Oilers, so 1st round pick. Another 1st round pick from Edmonton, and a 4th round pick, and you're selling high on Mattias Ekholm. And also this works out in the Oilers' favor because they did need this. They did need a defenseman. They were looking at Chychrun. Picking up Mattias Ekholm is a very smart move, so I'm happy with both teams on this trade. Again, I talked about this previously. We have the National Predators sending off Mikael Granlund. I didn't know that people wanted him. I think that one of the benefits of him is that he does have a little bit of term on his contract. And so he will be with the Penguins not only the rest of this year, but the next 2 years. And that did cost the Penguins a 2nd round pick. But it's more of that the Predators no longer have to pay his $5 million salary. So they actually saved $10 million over the next 2 years. And they get a 2nd round pick out of it. Good pickup by the National Predators. And lastly, picking up Rasmus Asplund, small change player for a 7th round pick. Again, just small, good move by the National Predators. Fairly inconsequential in my opinion. This is one of my. We're talking about the St. Louis Blues. This is one of my favorite teams of this deadline because I thought what they're doing is so smart. They recognize where they were early, and they said, "Hey, why don't we?" They're doing something similar, in my opinion, to the Washington Capitals, and which is crazy because the Washington Capitals actually won the Stanley Cup in 2018, and following that year is 2019 is the St. Louis Blues. So you have Stanley Cup caliber aspirations and players on these teams, and so you're saying, hey, how can we get to that same spot again? They recognized where they were, and they decided to take the opportunity to sell their UFAs and retool on the fly. So I'm very, very happy with what the Blues did here. Sending off Vladimir Tarasenko and Nico Mikkola over to the Rangers in exchange for a 1st round pick, Sammy Blais, who they just extended, Hunter Skinner, a prospect, as well as a 4th round draft pick. This is so smart, and they'll get either Dallas's or the Rangers pick in this case, and then they can also have an opportunity that the 4th round pick does become a 3rd round pick if the Rangers make the playoffs. So that's a guarantee. I mean, it's pretty much going to become a 3rd round pick. I mean, that's just going to happen. So good for them. Another trade they did is they sent off Ryan O'Reilly, which is huge in my opinion. And so they sent over Ryan O'Reilly and Noel Acciari using Minnesota Wild as a broker in this case. Picking up Adam Gaudette, AHLer, and a fringe NHL, I'd say. So he'll probably, because of how much they did trade at the deadline, they're probably going to get him some time. in the lineup, as well as Mikhail Abramoff, who is a prospect, so a probably B-level prospect, or more likely a B-level prospect from the Toronto Maple Leafs in this case. They also got the first, second, and third. Great pickup, and they're saving $5 million. So good for the Blues on this, and recognizing that Ryan O'Reilly wanted to move on, and he did want to say he wanted to stay, but again, Blues recognizing where they were and just making that. They're just ready, like, hey, let's just cut loose and get everything. Let's focus on the core of. You have Jordan Kyrou, and I can't think of the other one, but you have those players who you're thinking who are the more important, the actual core. It's Kyrou and Thomas, actually. So those are the two, Kyrou and Thomas. Focusing on that core. So another one, Ivan Barbashev, we was talked about potentially getting a first-round pick. And you kind of did. You got Zach Dean, who is the first-round pick of the 2022 draft for the Vegas Golden Knights. So you end up getting a first-round pick for St. Louis Blues. And he's a little bit developed already because he's in his D+1 year. D+1 meaning he's 1 year outside of his draft year. So... and lastly, this is a good pickup for Vegas and as well as the St. Louis Blues. Vegas always all in, so good for them. As well as you have the St. Louis Blues picking up the Jacob Vrana, sending over an AHR, Dylan McLaughlin, who actually expires at the end of the year, as well as the 7th round pick. So essentially, this is a cap dump for the Red Wings. They say they're saving half of the salary of Jacob Vrana, who they're probably going to buy out next year anyways. And Blues get an opportunity to say, hey, maybe we can take this guy and we can work with him and really rebuild him and flip him at the deadline next year. This is something they're doing with Capo Kapanen as well. And from who they picked up on waivers from the Pittsburgh Penguins. So again, Blues are just trying to do some asset management, trying to get some flips, and trying to see if they can work some of these players who maybe need those second chances. So good on the Blues for doing that. Proud of them. Again, I'm one of my favorite teams on doing this, and being that I'm a Red Wings fan primarily. Red Wings have gotten a lot of value from the St. Louis Blues, being Wallman, Sundqvist, who they did end up trading this year for a 4th-round pick, as well as a first rounder or a second rounder. So who ended up being not Barbashev, Buchelnikov, who's lighting up in the VHL as well as the KHL. So getting a little time between that over in Russia. So let's move over to some of the bigger trade partners of the year. We have. This is more of a cap dump. Arizona picking up Shea Weber's contract and sending over Dyson Mayo, just an AHL prospect. Paying him a 5th-round pick. They're just doing this so they can hit the cap floor. Boo. That's a trade sucks. I hate that they have to do that, but Vegas need to move out of contract, which is annoying. So, Arizona Coyotes did act as a broker for the Chicago Blackhawks and the New York Rangers, picking up half of Patrick King's salary for a 3rd-round pick. So, they will either get New York Rangers or Dallas's 3rd-round picks, and so whichever one's better. That's a pretty easy one, acting as a 3rd-round broker. They also sent Shane Gostisbehere for a 3rd-round pick. Ghost has been having a great job being able to rebuild his career up here out there in the Arizona Coyotes area. So I'm happy for them and happy that Ghost gets an opportunity to play in the playoffs with the Carolina Hurricanes. As well as one of the bigger trades that we even talked about, they did send off Jacob Chikrin, and they did get a 1st and 2 seconds out of this. And based on these conditions, what I've read, that the the 1st round is top 5 protected, and that's fine. It's probably not going to be top 5 because Ottawa Senators are doing better than that. They're on their fringe of potentially hitting the playoffs. So, and especially with the Jacob Chikrin, that increases their odds as well. And based on this, if they make the Eastern Conference Finals, which I don't believe they will, the 2nd becomes a 1st. Again, I don't think that'll happen. So I think it's just going to end up being a 2nd-round pick. But a little bit lower price tag. I thought that Jacob Chikrin was going to be going for 3 first-rounders. This ends up being a 1st-rounder and 2 second-rounders. Now, what I have been told is that 2 second-rounders is essentially the equivalent of 2 of a first-rounder. So when you're thinking people do trades, you'll see that what Kyle Dubas does is he takes his late first-round draft pick and trades it for 2 second-rounders. He feels that you get more stabs at the board, especially if your scouting staff is good enough. You can really optimize in those second-round picks. But however, the odds of a pick becoming less and less elite, I'd say, which you can say just statistically, the higher you are drafted in the draft, the more likely you are to be an elite player. So, I mean, this might not work out for Arizona. They have a ton of draft picks. It's crazy. But they're just acting as the third-party brokers and really just tanking at this point, tanking for Bernard. and trying to get as many good draft picks as they can. Again, so we see this again, another cap dump. Boo! They send out John Gillies, an AHL goalie prospect for Jacob Voracek, who's probably not going to be playing again for the rest of his career. And they pick up a 6th-round draft pick. Again, this is just to hit the cap floor. Boo! Arizona, that's dumb. Anyways, and then they send out Nick Bukestad as well as prospect Cam Dineenan. They get back Michael Kesselringer and a 3rd-round pick. Nick Bukestad actually talks about it as well, thanking the Arizona Coyotes for allowing them the opportunity over the last couple of years to regain his game back and get an opportunity to play with a playoff contender. So I think he's very grateful, and that's huge to hear that. That's amazing. So I'm happy for Nick Bukestad. And again, I think a good move by the Oilers just to shore up some depth. So the last move, and by the way, we'll be talking about the Calgary Flames. This is their only move that they made, but they ended up trading. I think it's the first. They said that was the first trade where brothers ended up getting traded. So they ended up moving Nick Ritchie out, one of the higher commodities, as well as Troy Stetcher out for Connor Mackey, who's a prospect, and Brett Ritchie, who's a lower contract player. They ended up moving those guys out. And so it's funny. It's the first trade of brothers. You know, I would be bummed if I was Nick Ritchie being like, oh my God, I'm going to Calgary. That's amazing. I'm so excited. I'm going to play with my brother. And he's going the other way. You're literally two planes crashing, 2 planes passing in the night, going to different places, man. So that's a bummer. If I was Nick Ritchie, maybe I'd just stay an extra day just to wait for to see my brother at least. So, oops, sorry about the microphone hit. But, and then now we have a final team of this trade deadline in the Central Division, the Chicago Blackhawks, who had some pretty good moves. Again, I think that they're in. I don't like the Chicago Blackhawks right now, just being a Red Wings fan, but I am happy with the way that they're doing their rebuild. They're not trying to just hit the cap floor, but they're definitely tanking for Bedard. Their lineup is abysmal. So, but let's see what they're doing. They're picking out Nikita Zaitsev, who is a usable player, by the way, unlike the Shea Weber contract or the Jacob Voracek that Arizona's doing. Yeah, I'm talking shit about Arizona. I am. So, lastly, the Chicago Blackhawks are picking up Nikita Zaitsev, and Senators are moving out Nikita for a 2nd and a 4th-round pick. This is just, and the reason they're doing that is because Nikita Zaitsev has his contract till next year as well. So, on the Senators saving cap, and the Blackhawks picking up picks. Good for them. Quick AHL deal, Josiah Slavin for Hunter Drew. Again, I talked about the Colorado Avalanche, Jack Johnson going to his hometown boys, not hometown, going to his boys out in Colorado where he won that. And so this is more of a due respect for Jack Johnson. Then the Blackhawks setting over Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty. This was smart for the Toronto Maple Leafs because they got to these 2 awesome picks, and Blackhawks again optimizing the value of these 2 players now while they're actually good. Not to say they're not going to be next year, but since they're such a hot commodity right now and so desired, say, hey, why not get this now? Get it while you can. So they got their 1st-round draft pick and a 2nd-round draft pick a lot later, 2025 and a 2026. Mind you, that's 2025 is 3 drafts from now because you have the 23 draft, the 24 draft, and the 25 draft. 23 draft has not happened yet. And then you have picking up Pavel Gogolev and Joey Anderson. Joey Anderson has played on the roster for Toronto this year, and Pavel Gogolev is a prospect. So again, just building up that depth for them. So, and here for this is for the Patrick Kane trade. The Chicago Blackhawks do move out Patrick Kane, 50% retained, and they use the Arizona Coyotes as 50% retained. Goes to the New York Rangers. They did pick up from New York. They picked up prospect Andy Walensky. And a 2nd and a 4th. This is a bummer because the 2nd round can become a 1st-round pick. That's top protected in 2024 or 2025 if the New York Rangers make the Eastern Conference Finals. So they're really cheering for the Rangers at this point, and they're cheering for Kane as well. But like I said, they didn't really have an option to do much because Kane has a no movement clause, so they could either got nothing for him or got something, and they did end up getting something from him. So it's a little smaller than what you expect for Patrick Kane, who is still an elite player, still putting up about 0.8 or about 1.5 points per 2 games. So he's still doing pretty well. But again, that no trade clause doesn't do you any favors, unfortunately. So here you are picking up Anders Bjork, AHL player from the Sabres. Not a big move. Doing a quick AHL move here with the Anaheim Ducks. Also selling off, the Blackhawks selling off Max Domi sending over prospect goalie Dylan Wells. In coming back, they get Anton Hudobin's contract, who's in the AHL right now, as well as a second-round pick. So again, just taking on this contract that's not wanted anymore, along with the second-round pick. So good for Chicago. And then you have just picking up Austin Wagner. Oh my goodness, his look at how low his 8,333. This is nothing. So I don't even know who this player is. I'm actually let's look at who this player is, because actually we're at the end of the video, and hopefully someone's sticking around. But I think he's just buried at this point. Playing, yeah, he's young too. I think 25 years old, so he's young. Oh, and he's only here for, yeah, he's definitely down in the AHL. If that's his salary. So, anyways, good for the Chicago Blackhawks, and like I said, they did a great job there. So I'm proud of everyone. I'm proud of most people, not Arizona. They're annoying. But anyways, let me know what your thoughts are on the Central Division. This is a bit of a longer video because there's so many three-way trades at the Arizona Coyotes and New York Rangers, who are making big move, or they made with the New York Rangers. So this is a very exhausting video, but I'm excited. If you stuck around, hit like, subscribe. Love you. Catch you later.